In an aeroplane, the pilot's main focus is to assure a safe and efficient flight. There's no room for sustainability efforts for those in the cockpit. Or is there? Could the pilot have direct influence on a more sustainable flight by, for instance, using a flight plan or optimizing fuel consumption? Mr. Frans Huisman, Director Air Traffic Management and 777 Captain at KLM, shares with us how pilots can positively influence the sustainability transition of the aviation sector. Dear Mr. Huisman, thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you.
To talk to us about your insights on airline operations with a specific focus on sustainability, sustainable aviation. Would you be so kind to briefly introduce yourself?
Yeah, Frans Huisman. I'm Frans Huisman. I'm a captain on a 777, already working for almost 30 years within KLM. And besides my flying job, I also have a ground job. I'm a manager of the air traffic management department within flight operations. That involves everything what we have to do with aircraft routes, with flight planning and airspace design, also to the future.
Sounds like an interesting job.
It's a very interesting job.
To start off, economic flying and more sustainable flying, they share a big common point, namely the ambition to burn less fuel, whilst of course maintaining safety and quality regulations. With the current increased focus on sustainable flight and improving sustainable flight, has KLM taken new measures on fuel consumption?
Yes, absolutely, because it was an economic business proposition to burn less fuel, less cost, and fuel is about 30% of our total cost in KLM, so it was always our focus. But now reducing our carbon footprint is also becoming our survival, because if we are not reducing our carbon footprint, then we can fly less with KLM and earn less money. So it's on the agenda. And that's why we have a strategy roadmap within KLM to reduce our carbon footprint with 12% compared to 2019. And you only can do that if you can invest in sustainability. That's the only way to come there. If you do nothing, you operate like you do today, you're not going to reach that goal. That's impossible.
Clear, thanks. And what is the role of the man or of the woman in the cockpit, the pilot flying?
The pilot flying, what we basically need as a pilot to burn less fuel is first to have the right aircraft. That's important. And if you compare the old generation aircraft, the 747, with the newer generation, the 787-10, they are 40% more fuel efficient than the old generation aircraft. So the right equipment is the first one. The second one, we're talking about fuel. Sustainable aviation fuel is paramount. It reduces your carbon footprint significantly. I did a sustainable flight challenge this year, flying from Amsterdam to Edmonton, and we went to the max to fill it up with as much sustainable aviation fuel as possible. So by that we reduced our carbon footprint with 30%. So that's a massive numbers. So if you have the fuel right, you have the aircraft right, then you have to be, it's like a Formula 1 car, make the setup right. So we need to fly with clean engines. So engine water wash is important. If you do that regularly, you put it in your processes, clean engines burn less fuel. It's the same with loading the aircraft. Make sure that the loading is as aft as possible, then you burn about 1 to 2% less fuel on the route. So all the preconditions set, then basically flight operations kicks in, and our flight planners, dispatchers, going to make flight plans. And they have a big computer, they use them to produce the most optimum flight route depending on the weather conditions and the airspace structure. So if all set, then the pilot, he starts his job, and everything in our responsibility is set to reduce fuel burn as much as possible within the safety and on-time constraints we have. So our takeoff procedures is all set to reduce fuel burn as much as possible. When we start flying, we like always as pilots, we're looking for the most optimum flight route, most optimum altitudes. We cut the corners where it is possible, and we like to descend with continuous descent to the airports. That is basically our modus operandi we do as pilots.
So from the organization point of view, you mention topics that can be implemented say next year. So the aft loading, for example, or the increased engine wash, but also the use of more efficient platforms, more new aircraft, or better engines. How does KLM act upon those challenges? Is it some specific department within KLM that pushes those innovations, or is it more broadly positioned within the company?
It's more absolutely, it's top down basically. From the bottom you provide the information to the top level, the executive level, and they make the roadmap, because there are a lot of investments involved here. And we're talking about new aircraft, that's a lot of money, but also about sustainable aviation fuel. You have to buy it in to get the larger amounts in the tanks. But from a flight operations perspective, we are working in our department to get the best tools to the cockpit. We are now currently flying with the flight management computer in the aircraft. That is basically a simple computer. It's very safe, but it's not able to make very accurate calculations about optimum flight altitudes, optimum speeds. So there the technology kicks in. We are using supercomputers on the ground with much more big data, more data enriched with aircraft models, and we provide with connection to live to the cockpit the pilot the information when it's the best opportunity to either make another route or make a step climb or a step descent to conserve fuel.
Interesting. That's really a step towards data-driven decision making that you implement at your air traffic management.
And it is not a mature market. You cannot buy a solution from a provider and we go with it. The market is still in development. A lot of research we are also doing together with the university. And our ambition is in the coming 3 to 4 years to make that technology available in the cockpit.
So these are more technology-driven innovations.
Yeah.
What about more innovations that touch upon the business model of KLM, connecting people, bringing people from A to B? So, for example, flying lower and slower. Is that something that could help reduce the negative effects of flight?
I think absolutely what can help is reduce your speed. We have an economical speed, but we are a network carrier. We have to arrive on time because passengers have a lot of connections out of our here, especially in Amsterdam. So we speed up, we burn more fuel to arrive on time. If you put more, we call it basically time in your flight process, then you can more of the time you can reduce your speed to economical speeds. And that can make up a difference in a flight, 4 or 5%, burning less fuel. So we are thinking about those concepts, but those concepts cost money. That's basically what it is.
And is that acceptable, do you think, for the passengers? Are they willing to make that step to have, for example, longer waiting times between flights to allow for this more room within the schedule?
That's culture change, I think, of course. If you look, when you buy a ticket, you make your decision. You're not looking at basically how sustainable is the airline. You don't see what your footprint is if you fly from Amsterdam to New York. And there is a huge difference between an airline flying with modern aircraft with sustainable aviation fuel and these techniques, than compared to an airline that is not doing it. Then most of the passengers go for the low price. So that model must change, absolutely.
Yeah. So becoming more sustainable as an industry, it is really a collaboration between the OEMs of the aircraft, airlines themselves, air traffic management, but also ourselves as customers.
Yeah, absolutely.
That make decisions based on price and travel time, for example.
Absolutely.
Next to emissions, burning fuel causes emissions. There's also, of course, other impacts of aviation on society. For example, particulate matter during different phases of flight, startup, but also noise, for example, or condensation trails. From an operations point of view, where do you think the emphasis towards optimization of your flight path should be? Or can you combine those different elements of reducing the effects?
You can combine, because we know that contrails, there's still coming more evidence that it is also contributing to the warming up effect of the Earth. So we are also starting a trial within KLM, with a startup company, to avoid the contrails in the air. And there are models available which forecast where the contrails will be. And we are trying to avoid these altitude bands basically on the routes. And we start with the European fleet. The impact of flying off optimum altitude is not so big in fuel consumption, and see where the concept goes.
Interesting. When do you see that actually applied in those everyday flights?
They're starting the first trials, and if the concept works good and the evidence is there, is that you have a model which can forecast the contrails, and when you fly there, it's accurate, then the industry can change, and it will be then what we are thinking about implemented in the flight planning system. Take that forecast within the model, and then plan the flights based on that information.
And does that give new challenges? Because when KLM starts doing, you can count on it that other competitors in the field will also start working on different flight levels to avoid those contrails. It will become perhaps quite crowded on certain flight levels.
Yeah.
What do you see happening there then?
That could be the case, because that means there is less capacity in the air. And then you get delays on the ground, and when delays on the ground happen, we're going to start speeding up our flights to arrive on time, and you burn more fuel basically. So that's it. We'll see in the future where it goes. But there is enough space when you're looking over the Atlantics, looking over the Arctic where we fly, so you can apply that concept over there. Applying the concept here in Europe where it's very busy, I think that is an issue. But there is a lot of space around in the world where we can apply these concepts.
Yeah. So every little step helps. So let's hope that we get there sooner than later. Perhaps could you summarize what you think are the top priorities for pilots to contribute to cleaner flight?
Yeah, looking from the pilot perspective, is that we like to fly with the modern aircraft, and with an energy mix. It could be either hydrogen, or it could be electric, or it could be a combination with sustainable aviation fuel to fly the flight. And what we as pilots basically want, we would like to have the airspace available to fly our optimum flight. And when you look nowadays in Europe, that is still not possible. There is still a lot of constraints in the airspace. Single European sky is not coming off the ground. But if you give us this airspace to fly our optimum flight, we're going to do it.
Excellent.
And especially if you give us the information when is the best time to preserve fuel by choosing another altitude or a more economical speed, then we can make a difference.
Thank you very much for these insights.
Thank you.
Okay.